We pay our respects to the elders, both past, present, and to the emerging elders and leaders of the First Nation communities across Australia.
I am very excited about today. I have in the studio Kyrene Paine. I've known Kyrene since, anyway, a long time, at least probably 12 years, I think. And I've got to watch this young woman grow into herself and find her way in the world. So very exciting to have this chat today. So Kyrene, we just had a listen to a little bit of your music then. You weren't playing the violin, which is what I knew you as a violin player. You're now a viola player, and we're going to find out about that, aren't we?
Mm-hmm.
How did it all begin for you, your musical journey?
I started the violin under Mum's tuition when I was about 8 years old. I really wanted to learn, so I begged her for about a whole year.
Oh, yes.
And then finally my first Santa present was a violin.
Yes.
And I began at school, still under Mum's tuition. And when we moved to Australia, I kept playing as well.
Wow. So you were not in Australia when you were 8. Where were you?
England.
London.
Born there.
Yeah. So, and you were surrounded by a lot of music, I believe.
Yeah, because Dad plays the French horn too, and Mum is a violinist.
Yes. And there's a bit of a family story that goes around that you were actually, I don't know, which stage were you playing? You were in vitro with your mum on some huge stage.
Kicking along to the music.
Yeah. What was the favourite composer of the day?
Mozart,
I
evidently.
believe it was Mozart. You'd go off. I think it might have been the same. So lots of fun. And I think that's the thing about young people. They don't often know about all these other influences that come in. So you then found your way to violin, begging. Santa gave you the gift. Beg Santa. You moved to Australia and found your way to Cairns. So what was that like for you, schooling in Cairns?
It was a lot different. I remember being surprised that we could go to school barefoot.
Yes.
And that people would actually
That's true. I didn't
actually do that.
Yeah, that's right. In t-shirts, shorts, yeah, that's right. It's very cash. And so you were playing music at school?
Yep. I played in the small string ensemble that they had at Trinity Beach Primary School in Cairns.
Oh, yes.
Frank Bray was my teacher then.
Frank, yes. Mr. Bray, we call him.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And then I went to high school and I kept playing violin there as well.
And so what happened at high school? Because that's often where people start in their more formal training as well. You would have been doing exams.
Yeah, I started my AMEB exams when I was 14.
Mm-hmm.
I started with grade 3 violin and then I went up to grade 8 eventually.
Great. In high school, you reached grade 8. That's quite an achievement, isn't it?
Yeah.
So you're at high school, playing in the whatever you can learn at the school and doing private lessons with your mum, who's quite a well-known violinist and certainly master teacher for people. So that was a bit of a privilege, really, but I don't suppose you really appreciated that at the time as a young person, did you?
Probably not as much as I could have.
Yeah. And then that's when you started to get other teachers, right? What happened there?
I got another private teacher, Stella Massey, whom a lot of people in Cairns know, especially the music people.
Oh, yeah.
That's when I started doing exams. I started with her. She put me onto the AMEB exams and then eventually Trinity Guildhall.
Yep. Wow. At some point, there must have been a moment where that wasn't enough in terms of learning. There must have been a bigger, wider world out there. What did you do then?
I got a music scholarship to TAS
and
I played in the strings ensemble there.
Yes.
Sue Stitt was my conductor. And then I played in the full orchestra they had there as well.
Wow.
I think Sue Stitt also conducted that one. And then we also started up a school quartet of just the most advanced and the oldest kids, like 4 of us.
Yep.
And then once again, Sue Stitt was our conductor for that too.
So,
or our mentor, I guess.
yeah, she's pretty amazing too in Cairns. So that's the Trinity Anglican School, right?
Yep.
So private
White
school.
Rock. Yeah.
Yeah. And that must have been a very proud moment when you actually got the scholarship, right? You would have auditioned.
I was very
and-
happy.
I bet you were. So what was special about TAS, though, as a learning environment? Why did that make a difference?
I think everyone was more dedicated,
Mm-hmm.
just to school in general.
Yeah.
And just nicer school to be at out of the two.
Mm. Yeah, I think that's important, isn't it? It's not necessarily that it was a private school, but the environment, the teachers, the students, they were all on the same path instead of having people that were...
It was better for the arts as well.
Yeah, right. So they had facilities and equipment and things like that. Yeah, wow.
And practice rooms.
And practice rooms that you're allowed to use. And so that, what would you say was the most amazing moment for you during school? During
Graduating.
That time? Graduating, right. So that's the thing about school, isn't it? It's all about those marks and finishing school. When were you starting to think about what next?
Probably not until year 12, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And I ended up doing a bridging course at James Cook University about the year after for a few months.
Those bridging courses are amazing, aren't they?
Yeah.
Did you think you would go to uni?
Yes. I knew that. I just didn't know what I was doing yet.
Yeah, right. And I think that is the problem, isn't it, for a lot of kids, is that how would you know at 15, 16? So you did the bridging course, and then that, here in Australia, for those that are overseas, if you do these bridging courses, then you're guaranteed a place in a university. Is that right?
In the university, you do the bridging course at.
Ah, right. So that was the local James Cook University.
Yep.
And your course was?
I did a Bachelor of Creative Industries.
Which is not about performance, right? That's not a performing arts degree.
They had visual arts and graphic design and photography, media.
Right.
But the Townsville campus actually had music subjects too, just not the Cairns campus.
So you would have had to do them online or move, right? To do
That was the choice.
Yeah.
I only did one music, one online.
So I remember that time because it was a bit surprising. You ended up being this classical violinist, then doing graphic design and doing quite well at it, right?
Everything.
Yeah. Well, I suppose that's a really sensible path to take. What did you find about the once you got past the bridging and you were doing a degree? That's amazing, right? That's considering that you hadn't got the marks in the first place. You then go and do the bridging, and then you find yourself studying amongst all these other people. What do you think was the highlight of doing that degree?
Well, going on a study tour.
Oh, yeah.
That I went to in second year.
Mm-hmm.
We got to go to Europe for 3 weeks.
Wow.
In the European winter, technically, around June.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, European summer.
Yeah.
And we went to Venice, Milan, Frankfurt, Würzburg, and Berlin.
Wow.
Not in that order, though. Actually, the opposite order.
Fair enough. It's funny how the memory works like that. So what was good about that? What did that do for you as a young person?
It was really fun. We got to study in Berlin, go to university there, so it was interesting. Yeah. Even though we only spent 3 or 4 days at the university, it was interesting to go to uni in a different country and non-English or multilingual country where, they're speaking English and German.
Yeah, they're brought up like that, aren't they? Yeah. You finished again, right? What happened then? Did you know what you were going to be then?
I wanted to do a graduate diploma in graphic design. It's funny because I wanted to do that at the university I'm at now, Victoria University.
Right.
And so I moved to Melbourne for that. I got into enrolling and everything, and then I just decided I didn't want to do it.
Yeah.
And so I got a job as a violin teacher for Metro Music School. Which I worked at for every Friday.
Yes.
During the day.
How old were you then?
23.
23, and you got your first job as a teacher, and you hadn't done a teaching degree.
No.
Wow, fantastic. That's really good. So your ability to work, I saw at a very young age, because you would take yourself off into town. I mean, Cairns is a tourist town for those that haven't been here, and it's a beautiful place, an esplanade, lots of tourists walking around. And you had, how old were you when you started busking?
17.
17.
Because I was straight out of high school.
Right, so you'd finished high school and then you started busking.
Yeah, I started with a friend who was learning violin from Mum.
Yes.
And we knew each other because we'd done all the Stedfords and competitions together. We always entered as a duo.
Yes.
And yeah, so we started busking as a duo, but that eventually turned into solo.
So that was quite an amazing time, I remember. Actually, there's people I know now that remember you from then, busking, because it's quite unusual to see a classical instrument on a city street being busked. How did you find that?
I think I was about the only violin busker in Cairns, in the city.
Yes, certainly at that time. I've met a couple since, but they're more like visitors that come and go. They're not people.
Not regulars.
No, and even in my upbringing in Melbourne, I don't remember. Sometimes you'd see, like you say, duos or quartets or whatever, but to see a solo violinist, that would have been very special for some.
Or now a violist.
And now a viola. Show us your viola. I don't know if people really understand the difference between a violin and a viola. I mean, I know it's a little bit bigger. What's the main difference?
So a violin will read in treble clef, and then alto clef is for viola.
Right.
And so, for those who don't know, those two things I just mentioned are like different systems for reading music.
Mm-hmm.
And the viola is actually the only one that uses alto clef.
In all the instruments
Yep.
or on the string? Wow.
All the instruments.
All the instruments. So it's got a very special voice.
Yeah.
In terms of the overall orchestra. So what led you to the viola, Kyrene?
So I got a job at Caroline Springs School of Music.
Mm-hmm.
That was in 2021. And I had to teach violin, viola and cello. And so I decided that at that point I was only teaching violin from the Music Education Academy.
Mm-hmm.
And I decided that if I was going to teach viola, I may as well buy one.
Yes.
And actually learn to play.
And actually know how to play.
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, it's not that unusual for teachers. Like, I've got a friend who's a drama teacher and she's just got a job as a maths teacher. Like, I think teaching is a technique, and what you're actually teaching it's great pleasure if you actually know what you're doing. So how did you find that, though, switching from violin that you had played since you were 8 and been around your whole life because your mum's a violinist, but you had heard the viola? Had you ever had an inkling that viola might be your instrument?
Not that I thought of then, but now I look back on it. There was one time a few years ago when Mum's friend Carolyn, she came to play in a concert with Mum, and she brought her viola, 'cause she's a violist. And I asked her at the end of one rehearsal if I could have a go on her viola, and just played it for like 5 minutes, and I didn't want to give it back to her.
Yeah, right. It was calling you probably.
Yeah.
Oh, come and play.
And I also noticed I play violin too, and I like the more mellow sounding violins.
Yeah.
But when I liked them, I didn't know that maybe that was a sign I wanted to go to viola.
Well, interesting, because you can string a violin to a viola tuning, can you? You? Like, I've seen that done.
Yeah, I think it would be a bit sacrilegious though.
Ah, okay. You found your way. Now do you feel like it is your instrument?
Yeah, I like it more than the violin now, actually.
Really? Why is that? What happens when you play the viola?
I like the mellow sound.
Right. Which
The
I suppose,
deeper sound.
yeah, the deeper sound and possibly the lines it plays too when you're in a orchestra or so. Have you played in an orchestra with it?
Yeah. I used to play in the Essendon Symphony Orchestra,
Oh, yeah.
adult community orchestra in Melbourne.
Yeah.
And I played in it from 2016 until 2021.
Yeah.
2022 last year.
Wow.
And for most of the time I played in the second violins.
Mm-hmm.
And then I joined the violas quite recently in like the start of last year.
Mm. Well, so Melbourne has given you quite a lot of opportunities by the sounds of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you don't mind the big city?
I like it, but I like living out in the suburbs.
Yeah, yeah. So you've got quite a nice place where you live and a way out. You get to go home from the
it's
city.
quiet.
So. Yeah, but you're studying now. You're on to your second degree. For someone who did a bridging course and didn't know what they were going to be doing, to now find yourself on a second degree, that's pretty amazing. Very inspiring. Well, what would you say to yourself at 14 if you could go back and give yourself advice about school?
To try and enjoy school.
Yeah.
It might be a little bit hard.
Yeah.
But I think you have to realise that even if you don't like it, it doesn't mean that you're not going to go on and do TAFE or do uni.
They're very different learning, aren't they?
Yeah. It's a lot more specific.
You talked about that to me once before about the fact that when you did the bridging course, it was like a combination between high school level education but with university expectations. I thought that was really interesting. What do you think is the key difference between high school and university?
University is more specific, like I said. So it's more tailored towards what you want to do.
Yeah.
You can also choose it. You can choose your study area, but in school, even when you get to choose electives in like year 11 and 12, it's still pretty defined.
Yeah, it's very determined by the school and the resources and the teachers available. That's right. I think that's what young people don't realise is all of a sudden university opens up.
You can do anything you want.
Anything. And the people, just like you, are doing the same course. Like all of a sudden you find that group, don't you?
Find your people.
You find your people. You definitely find your people. And is that what you found in Melbourne? Have you found more people that kind of into what you're into, do what you do, think like you, or is it more diverse than that?
It's probably both. I think it's quite diverse, but I found my people like through the church that I go to, and then obviously through being in the orchestra.
Yes.
Even fellow viola friends.
Yes.
And then through uni as well.
Is that what happens in an orchestra? Cello people hang out with cello people and violin people hang out with violin people?
It can be a bit like that. But we all love each other.
Of course, there's the greater good of the overall orchestra, I get that. But I've often wondered when I look on the stage, I go, oh, just the, percussion people, they're a bit weird. Like they must be just the ones at the end of the night and left to pack up. And So you're doing the degree in Melbourne. What was that in, the study area that you were focused on?
It's a Bachelor of Education.
This one you're doing now is the Bachelor of Education.
And I'm doing a major in music and minor in welfare.
In welfare?
Yeah.
Wow, how does that combine in your mind? What's your thinking about that?
Well, I think that if you think of the Maslow hierarchy of needs,
yes,
then a student can't learn if their basic needs aren't being met.
Right.
So if they don't feel safe at home, or if they're not having enough food, enough sleep, enough water, or any other life stresses or trauma,
yes,
or mental health issues, then you can't expect them to be getting A's on an English test or getting a good NAPLAN score in primary school or something. That's
something for, like, do they teach teachers that when you're doing an education degree anyway? Do you think other teachers could do with learning that? Like,
they are doing that now. That's how I learnt about that.
Right. Yeah, I don't know that many teachers I know have really think about that.
Yeah, I don't think they did that previously. I think it's more new.
Wow, that's really commendable, because I just think that changes the classroom environment, the approach, the care for that child. Did you have any significant teacher or adult along your way that did support you in that way, that you thought, wow, they understand what I'm doing or who I am? Is that an experience you had as a young person?
I had a few. My mum would be one of them, because she was my first violin teacher.
Yep.
Then my other violin teachers, Stella and June, both of them were pretty influential to me in my playing.
Yep.
And some high school teachers as well. Miss Taflos, she was my modern history and geography teacher. And I think she taught me a QCS subject as well. So she knew me pretty well, I'd say.
Yeah.
Teaching me 3 subjects for 2 years.
Wow.
And then also the classroom music teacher, Miss Falk.
Yeah, right. And you remember these teachers. So a lot of times students never go back and tell their teachers how significant they were. So teachers are unaware of, what they really do. And I definitely have 1 or 2 teachers I remember distinctly, one for good reason and one for not so good reason. Right. But I definitely remember that feeling of this one teacher who just seemed to realise that kids needed more than just the classroom teaching. He just remembered your name or say hello as you passed, or I don't know, he was just very special.
I had a lecturer in my first year of this degree that did something that really helped me, even on a personal level, and I actually went out and thanked her via email and told her about it.
Yeah, I think that's...
And she said it made her day.
Yeah. I think that is something for, if you're listening out there and you are going to school and you do have people teaching you that are influential, maybe, take some time to
thank them.
Thank them. They're humans too, isn't that right? Now you've become a teacher, so you're at the other end. All right, so we're going to cut forward a little bit because COVID. We can't ignore COVID. It's kind of there. In the old days, we used to say...
Contemporary.
It's very good. But in the old days, we used to say BC was, before Christ. Now it's before COVID.
Yeah.
So COVID came, and you're in Melbourne. So same as your sister and your brother, who, by the way, aren't on a musical journey. They've got their own amazing journeys, but out of 3 children and 2 virtuosic musician parents, only 1 became a musician. That's amazing. And anyway, so you came back to Cairns, all 3, to be with Mum during lockdown. And they raced you out before the real shutdown of the border and quarantine and everything. So how did you find coming back to your family home with your siblings and your mum and everyone, the whole world's in lockdown? What was that experience like?
I think it was nostalgic, but it was also a bit different because we were also used to living apart with I think my brother and sister were both still in Melbourne then, and so was I, but they lived together and I lived separately, so yeah.
All of a sudden you're back under the same roof, yeah.
Yeah, being together.
Yeah. So how was that time for you? Tell me a little bit about what you were doing during that time in Cairns.
I did a lot of busking, to be honest.
Yes.
That's when I started my Bachelor of Education degree. I started it online in 2020 on Zoom.
Yes, and I think that's a very common story actually around the world, that people took up the degrees they'd been wanting to do all these years and finally they're at home, a bit bored. Were you bored as well?
To some degree.
Yeah. Oh, it's that frustration of not being able to do what you normally would, isn't it? So, so you studied and then you went back to Melbourne. So even after all that, you still went back to Melbourne. How was that for you? What happened then?
I liked being back there because I've loved the city. I always have.
Yes.
And I also went back because, uni is there and so is work. and now they're both back in person. So it's church, so like everything's there.
Yeah, and it's familiar and you know it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you're doing very well. I'm so proud. That's amazing. I just love the way you talk about your jobs. The first one you got was only 1 day a week, right? So even though that was not a full-time job, it was a real job, as we call it in the arts.
Officially employed.
Officially employed.
And the boss.
You have to turn up, answer to someone.
Yeah.
They pay you every week. You like that?
You have to report to them.
That must have been a really great confidence booster, though, to get that job.
Yeah, because it was my first job. I hadn't had one in high school or anything. So it was my first actual job.
Though I would argue busking is an amazing job to have. It's a self-employed, self-motivated job. Do you think you earned a living from busking?
Yeah.
Yeah?
I think 80% of what I've earned is from it.
Wow. So without even knowing how much that is, but you can sustain yourself as a professional musician, technically.
Yeah, at the moment, yeah.
Wow. That's an amazing thing for a young person. But also that it gives you the flexibility to do what you want as well, you know, because we actually do need money. So not to have to go off and get a job at Supre or somewhere. Are we allowed to mention names? I don't know. But that's great. So tell me then, in terms of that, you're a teacher now. Explain to me a little bit about what that's like. Because you're not quite like, are you a private, like one-on-one teacher, or do you do classroom teaching as well?
So I have one private student at the moment, and I also teach at 2 different music schools, the Music Education Academy and Caroline Springs School of Music.
Yes.
But we do one-on-one lessons. It's typically what it is for violin and viola.
Yeah, right. So what's...
And cello.
And cello. Don't forget cello. How does that... What do you enjoy about teaching?
Well, I like being able to pass on my knowledge to others. And I've noticed that when I first started, I really liked teaching the absolute beginner, like 6 or 7 year olds, the really little ones.
Yes.
And now that I've had a few years of experience, I prefer teaching the older kids, like the 10 to 12 year olds.
Yeah, right.
And one thing we do at one of the music schools that I teach at is we have free trial lessons. And I find that I really enjoy that, like meeting the new student and seeing if they've played before and how advanced they are. Teaching them the basics of the violin if they haven't played before. Yeah,
right. Wow, so you've really not only just found the kind of job you like, you found the segment of that job that you really love. That's amazing.
What I like about it.
Yeah, and what you like about it. That's a really good thing for a young person as well. Not that you're that young anymore. You're starting to get past that category. We won't look at them. So where do you think that will lead you? What's next for you?
Well, in my last semester of my degree, I'm going to start looking at jobs to be a music teacher. And I would hope for it to be in Australia, but I'm also open to being international. So we'll see. Yeah,
we will see. And that's what I particularly love about knowing young people that are dynamic and clever and doing things is where are they going to be in 10 years' time? Like, can you even imagine that? Now, I suppose you can. I'm going to ask you, Kyrene, you must have had some highlights in your time as a player, because a lot of musicians out there will know that it's a lot of practice, a lot of rehearsals, a lot of week after week after week. But every now and again you have a moment that you just go, that's amazing.
Yeah.
What's your most recent moment that you've had that was an amazing opportunity?
My uncle's actually a violist, professional violist. He's part of an orchestra in Florida. The shout out to Jim Griffith.
Hi, Jim. Florida. Woohoo. Yeah.
Yeah. So he for one of my uni assignments, I learnt both parts of a viola duet.
Yes.
And he coached me on it via Zoom.
Oh, go Zoom. That's
And-
amazing.
Yeah, and so for New Year's Eve, I said to Mum, wouldn't it be really good if at your New Year's Eve party, if Jim and I can play the duet together somehow?
Yeah.
And so she said, why don't you message him and see if he can video record his part of the duet? And I messaged him and it all worked out, and we were able to play his part on a big screen TV, and then I played my part live.
Wow.
So we played a duet together on New Year's Eve from halfway across the globe.
That's amazing. So, Jim, have you been to Florida?
Yeah, when I was about 7 or 8 or something. A
Wow.
long time ago.
But they've been over to here.
Yeah,
to,
they
yeah.
came in 2017, I think
Yeah.
it was.
Wow. That is incredible. And I think that is when we talk about, you know, the good that's come out of COVID is, people have studied, but also this global connection that happens now. And it's nothing for people to just get online and talk with each other and keep in contact.
I also started the viola during COVID as well.
Yes, that's
Two
right.
things, a new degree and a new instrument.
Yeah, it's quite remarkable, and I think people that don't play musical instruments couldn't actually comprehend the idea of this lifelong journey with one instrument and then actually switching over to another, just to find that is your real instrument. You know, that's
I still
amazing.
play the violin though.
Yeah, well, you have to because you're a teacher of it. So. But I wouldn't imagine you would lose that skill. And I'd love to hear you on cello one day. That would be lovely. One day. She said no. But viola is beautiful. Thank you for playing. We will now hear a little bit more from Kyrene.
The piece I'm going to play is Allegro from Sonata in G by B. Marcello.
There you go. And the piece at the beginning?
That one was Minuet No. 1 by Bach from his suite in G major.
Beautiful. Thank you again. That was a wonderful conversation. I really appreciate you taking time out as you're up here on holidays and reconnecting with, well, your technically past homeland and
Family and friends.
family and friends. It's lovely to have you here back in the region. So thank you, Kyrene, and good luck with your next adventures, your next chapter in life.
Thank you.
No worries. Thank you.